call went out from the wall. Someone was coming. A lone figure on horseback appeared on the dusty road that stretched across the desert, the shimmer of heat blurring her silhouette. Behind her, a small cart creaked with every jolt of the trail. Chastity sat slumped in the saddle, her matted hair clinging to her sunburned face. The mare beneath her moved with slow, exhausted steps, ribs showing beneath its dusty coat. In the cart, hidden beneath a thin tarp, her husband Ugh lay motionless, bandaged, broken, and feverish. As the city of She loomed closer, the gates cracked open. Armed guards waited. She imposed a tax on everything that passed through its gates: cargo, beasts, people. A toll justified by its position as a trade hub, enforced with indifference. She dismounted without a word, without protest. She handed over the reins. A gruff guard stepped forward. His armor was scuffed and dull from years in the desert sun. Almond-colored eyes scanned her from head to toe. Tattered tunic, dirt-caked skin, and the hollow look of someone who had rough days behind them and more to come. He gestured toward the cart. "Yours?" Chastity swallowed hard, her voice cracking from thirst. "They belong to my husband." It wasn't a lie, not entirely.
"I surrender the horse and cart. I don't have much else."
The mare would likely be sold for scraps, the cart left to rot in some alley, but the surrender was enough, barely, to satisfy the gate toll. The guards let her keep her satchel and what coins she and Ugh had managed to save. The guard grunted, unconvinced or perhaps just uncaring. "What's your business in She?" Chastity hesitated, her mind racing. The wrong name could mean another tax, a turnaway, or worse. She licked her dry lips and spoke a single word, barely above a whisper. "Han." That stopped him. He straightened slightly, eyes narrowing as he studied her again, this time with something that might have been suspicion or recognition. "Han who?"
"He is a city guard. Do you know him?"
He nodded, then turned and barked an order at another guard to hold position, then waved a signal. They waited. Chastity did not know how long, minutes or hours. Eventually, a new figure emerged from the inner checkpoint, walking with the casual confidence of someone used to bending rules. He was lean but strong, his hair tied back in a loose tail. He was wearing the armor of a city guard. His presence cut through the checkpoint, lightening the mood of the other guards. They looked more comfortable, more likely to break the standard protocol. For better or worse would depend on Han. He approached the woman slowly, sizing her up with the wary posture of a man used to surprises. She looked worn down, unkempt, tired and travel-stained, not beautiful by the usual measure, but striking all the same, with a kind of quiet intensity in her eyes that held his attention. Next to her, the hulking form of a barbarian slumped against the side of the cart,
his breathing shallow, his muscles twitching in fevered sleep.
"You asked for me?" Hone said carefully. Her eyes met his, sharp and searching. "We're friends of Rune," she said, then glanced at the nearby guards and lowered her voice. "We're part of the guild." Hone's face lit up at the mention of Rune's name. He looked at the other guards. "They're good. Let them in." He nodded his head towards the city. Chastity looked at him with pleading eyes. "We need help." Hone showed them to a small house built against the city wall, Chastity supporting Ugh as they walked. The house was quaint. Hone explained that he lived here with his brother Tio. Hone offered them his bed and said that they could stay there for a few days. The next morning, after cleaning Ugh's wounds and praying over Ugh, Chastity cleans herself up, trying to make herself look as presentable as possible, even with her ripped tunic. She left the safety of the home on the edge of the city and walked further into the hustle and bustle of the largest city in the world. Chastity headed to the Temple of Christians. There was a temple for each of the major religions in Z. The temple was larger than she expected for one outside of northern Nod. He received rows of pews leading up to an ornate central dais, a confession booth, and doors on either side of the sanctuary, leading to other rooms. She was approached by a younger man in monk's robes, who she promptly asked to speak to the father. He showed her to a side room. There the father was reading over an old scroll. He was a middle-aged man, plump and balding, his almond skin glistening from the heat of the day. He glanced at Chastity over the scroll. "Do you seek confession, child?" She stiffened. Did he ask that because of her appearance? Confession was not something that the church back in Civil did. "No, Father. I am looking for work. I am a third-level cleric and eager to serve." "Would you not be better suited for the Adventures Guild?" "No, I have former allegiances." "I see." A long pause followed. "I'm afraid that I don't have any use for you. Brother Wu and I have the functions of the temple under control." "There is one other thing, Father." She told him about her husband and their situation. He agreed to pay them a visit when he made his rounds. Soon after leaving the church, Chastity puked. With the last of her coin clutched in her fist, she wandered the outer edges of Z, searching for anything they could afford. Most places turned her away without a word. Some just laughed. Eventually she found a widow willing to rent out the crawl space beneath her crumbling home. The old woman had lost her. The lower walls were just packed dirt, the upper half roughly built from uneven stones. There were no windows, no doors, just a slit of canvas hanging over the narrow entrance, like a tongue bitten between teeth. There was only one room, one miserable, suffocating room, but it was theirs, or close enough. It took her nearly half the next day to get Ugh there. He was a heavy man, even in his weakened state, and delirious from the fever. She supported him under the arms, dragging and coaxing him one unsteady step at a time through the slums. The stares they got ranged from pity to suspicion. No one offered help. When they finally reached the hovel, she had to stop to catch her breath, bracing herself on the wall as she wheezed. Inside, she helped Ugh lie down on a flattened pile of old rags she'd scavenged. His head lolled to one side, eyes glazed. He didn't seem to know where he was. She had never seen someone that she cared about in such a condition. She wonders if she had made the right choice in not going to her parents' house. She pushed the thought from her head. They would probably turn them away anyway. Chastity sat beside him in the dirt, brushing back the tangled hair from his brow, and let the silence settle around them like dust. This hole wasn't safe, wasn't clean, wasn't anywhere close to enough. But for now it was shelter, and that was more than they'd had yesterday. The following day, Father Lou stepped into the hovel, shifted his robes uncomfortably at the conditions before him, pulling up his robes and kneeling with Chastity in front of a feverish Ugh. "I've prayed for healing. I've never had the Lord not answer at all," pleaded Chastity. "Sometimes the Lord doesn't answer our prayers. That doesn't mean that you did something wrong." The priest spoke as he removed the bandages from the barbarian's head. The priest examined Ugh's injury. "What happened to him?" Another from his tribe challenged him. According to their traditions, he could not refuse. "The beating was brutal," she admitted. The priest touched the wound tenderly. "His skull is broken. The break probably saved his life, allowing the brain to swell. Will he survive? If you get this infection under control, then perhaps. But it could take a long time to recover fully. And if he does, he might not be the same. You understand?" Chastity nodded, unable to fight back the tears. She wept openly. She welcomed the priest's embrace. He pulled a small clay jar from inside of his robe. "Apply this salve to his wound, morning and evening." Chastity accepted the jar like it was a precious artifact. "Well, waive the usual donation," added the priest. As he was leaving, he hesitated. "Come by the temple tomorrow. The pews could use a good scrubbing, and occasionally, adventurers from the guild come by, looking for a blessing. I can't promise much." Chastity wanted to hug the man, but managed thank you instead. It was only after he left that she wondered how the man knew where they were. He must have asked around looking for them. The realization made her smile. As the weeks dragged on, Ugh slowly began to regain strength. The fever broke one night in a wave of sweat and shivering, and though he hovered at the edge of consciousness for days after, it marked a turning point. His movements remained stiff, sluggish, and uncoordinated, as if his limbs no longer trusted the command sent from his brain. But he was alive and getting a little better each day. Chastity did everything she could to keep them afloat. Her hands grew raw from scrubbing temple floors and hauling buckets of water, and she rarely returned home without dirt streaked up to her elbows. The work was hard and the pay meager, but sometimes a temple patron would slip her a leftover crust of bread or a copper piece for blessings received. She stretched every kindness as far as it would go. When they had nothing else, providence arrived in the form of near-forgotten charity. Small mercies passed down by strangers who didn't know her name. Still, it was never quite enough. Their hovel remained dark and damp, the scent of mildew and sweat heavy in the air. But it was no longer a place of helpless waiting. Ugh began to walk again. Just a few steps at first, leaning heavily on the walls or on Chastity's shoulders, his feet dragging through the dirt. It was painfully slow, like watching a statue try to remember it had once been flesh. His muscles, once iron-hard and battle-sure, now twitched and trembled with each movement, fighting through pain and confusion. But he was walking. Each day, he forced himself to rise and pace the small confines of their cellar room, and eventually the street outside. He grunted through the stiffness, ground his teeth against the pain, and refused to stop even when sweat soaked through his tunic. Chastity watched in quiet awe, never saying much, though sometimes her eyes shone with pride or fear. He couldn't always tell which. He walked down the dusty street, passing by a beggar. He would not allow that to be his fate. If only his limbs would do what he commanded them the way that they had before. It was like his body having to relearn how to move. He did not remember the battle, but he did remember that upstart Roosh challenge of his leadership. He gritted his teeth as he stumbled over some rubbish. He was an expert warrior, slaying a mighty phasing panther and leading the guild in Ed's absence. Now he was stumbling on rubbish in a dirty ghetto. He hated being so dependent on Chastity. He felt like a child burdening her. She did not show it, but he knew she was aggravated at his slow recovery. He hadn't asked her about the baby, but he often heard her retching. He didn't know if that was good or bad. He spotted some shady figures eyeing him from an alley. Even after being mostly immobile for weeks, muscles still rippled his body. Although he was so much learned now. He passed by. The thugs did not challenge him. Another week or so, and they would be instrumental in his plan to get out of this slum. Fang peered out of the alleyway, a smoking roll of wizard's weed between his teeth. That cripple was out walking again. He had not bothered the man thus far. He did not have anything worth taking, but today was different. Another man that Fang did not know was walking with him. Fang extinguished the end of the wizard's weed with his fingers and sized the man up from the safety of the alleyway shadows. The cripple was leaning heavily on a walking stick, wearing little better than rags, though today a small pouch hung on his belt. Interesting. The stranger was average in size, smaller than the cripple. We walked with arrogance or confidence. He wore average clothing, though much nicer than what was typically been in this part of town, loose trousers and an open flow shirt. Could he be concealing a weapon? Fang doubted it. He was probably someone from the church who took pity on the cripple. Besides, it had been a while since they had a good score. Fang grunted to his friends and nodded his head toward the pair of men. 3 shadows slinked out of the alleyway behind him, intercepting the cripple in the stranger's path. Fang dipped his hand into a fold of his clothes, and it emerged with a wicked curved knife. Ugh couldn't help but smirk. The thugs had taken his bait. The guy with the knife was saying something, but Ugh was not listening. He knew the deal. He put his hand on Han's arm and looked into his eyes. "I'll handle this." The man with the knife shouted something, his 3 friends spreading out. In a swift movement, Ugh thrust the end of his walking stick at the thug's face like a spear, aiming for his throat. Ugh missed, hitting the man's cheek in a glancing blow. That caught the thug by surprise, but he recovered quickly, stabbing with the knife. Ugh sidestepped the attack. The other 3 moved in on him. In one motion, he dropped the stick and punched the closest one in the face. Ugh was tackled by another goon. He cursed his uncoordinated feet as they fell, hitting the ground. From the corner of his eye, he saw that the one with the knife and the 4th thug had tripped over each other. The one who fell with him was on top of him, punching his face. He turned his head to protect his wound and closed his eyes to the pain, reaching out and finding his assailant's face. The thug wrapped his hands around Ugh's thick neck and began to squeeze. Ugh's hands found his face and shoved his thumb into his eye, his other fingers gripping the side of the guy's ear. There was a cry of pain. Then Ugh struck him on the other side of the head with all his might, using his free hand in a closed fist, hard enough to knock the man off from on top of him.
Just before the first thug lunged down at him with his knife, Ugh's reflexes were too slow, and the blade pierced Ugh's chest through the side of his pectoral. Instinctively, Ugh grabbed the stabbing hand by the wrist with both of his hands, pulling in opposite directions, his face contorting with the effort, until there was a satisfying cracking sound. The man pulled back his broken wrist, his hand dangling. Still on the ground, Ugh kicked the man's knee hard and the thug folded, falling to the ground. He tried to catch his fall and his broken wrist cracked against the ground, causing him to curl up in pain. The last remaining man was running away. Han produced a knife from his waistband and threw it. The knife spun in the air, catching the sunlight before it sunk into the man's back. He fell to his knees, coughing blood. New standing Ugh assessed the situation of the 4 assailants. 2 were crawling away back to the spaces between dilapidated buildings. One was nowhere to be seen, must have run off upon seeing the fate of his friends. The last one laid nearby, red pooling around their head. Ugh watched as Han sauntered over to one man, crawling away, and plucked his knife from the victim's back, then wiped it clean on the wounded man's clothing. Ugh felt the pain in his body, but he was now accustomed to it. He looked at the knife sticking out of the side of his breast, blood streaming from the wound. He was lucky the blade had only hit him in the side of the chest, sticking into his pectoral, and not deep into his body. It would have been embarrassing to be killed by a common street thug. Ugh approached Han and set a heavy hand on his shoulder. His grip was firm, not aggressive, but enough to say this matters. Ed told me about the fights, the ones under the city. I can fight. Han blinked, clearly caught off guard. You were barely standing a few weeks ago, and I know, Ugh cut in. His voice was low but steady. But Chastity's pregnant. That stopped Han. His expression shifted, confusion giving way to something quieter, heavier. We need money, Ugh continued. I need this. A long beat of silence passed between them. The desert wind tugged at Han's cloak. He looked into Ugh's face like he was seeing a stranger, or maybe someone who'd finally shown their real self. Then, quietly, he nodded. Together they walked back to the space where Chastity and Ugh were living. Chastity was outside sitting in the dirt cooking a stew over a small fire. She gasped when she saw Ugh. He had forgotten to remove the knife from his pectoral.
By the light of a lantern, Father Lu sewed Ugh's flesh with a needle and thread. His hands were steady, with practiced precision. "How did you learn to do that?" asked Chastity, curiosity. "Before I became a priest, I was a field medic in an adventuring party. On one particularly unlucky dungeon run, my group ran into another party. Our best fighter had been badly wounded. I had done everything that I had learned to do. He was going to die a slow, painful death. Then the cleric from the other party came to him and prayed that he would be healed. Before my eyes, his wounds closed and his color returned. The priest spoke as he worked. I was intrigued. I wanted to know more. I did not know at Oz the time, but that sent me down the path to becoming a priest. After the priest left, Ugh complained once again. You did not have to send for him. You didn't have to get stabbed in the chest. You could have died again, Chastity retorted. You know the life that we live, Chastity. Tomorrow is never a guarantee, Ugh scolded her. Things are different now, and you want to fight for money, Chastity yelled at him. How are they different, other than I lost? Is that what this is about? You don't want to be with a broken man? Chastity broke, biting back tears. I'm pregnant, Ugh. We're going to have a baby. That makes it different. There was a pause, Chastity holding her stomach. If something happened to you, now? Ugh crossed the distance between them, leaving the rest unsaid. Chastity buried her face in his shoulder, in the mist of their embrace. I'll be careful, Ugh promised. That night, as the coals glowed, and the city settled into its usual murmur of distant shouting and clinking metal, Ugh lay beside Chastity on their threadbare mattress of bundled rags. His chest throbbed with each breath, but it wasn't the pain that kept him awake. It was the weight of what came next. Fighting meant danger, but it also meant coin. Real coin. Enough, maybe, to get them out of the gutters. He could feel Chastity's hand resting lightly on his bandaged side, her fingers tremoling just a little. Ugh stared at the cracked ceiling above them and made a silent promise. He would not die in the dirt, not for pride, not for coin, but for her, and for the life growing inside her. Days later, Ugh lay in their living space. Chastity had made it more homelike over the weeks they'd lived there. A strip of fabric now hung over the doorway. An old, discarded wash basin sat in the corner. Wooden planks had been laid to cover the dirt floor, and a dozen other salvaged items gave their home a strange charm. All of it gleaned from scraps and refuse around the city, turning their whole into a trove of unwanted gems. Ugh's stomach growled. They hadn't eaten much in days. She tried to sound calm, but he saw the worry in her eyes. He felt it too, like a stone in his chest. They needed food. They needed safety. And tonight was his chance to provide. He had spent the last days allowing his wounds to heal and exercising his body, in preparation for what was to come. He wondered how long they would last if he lost. They had already spent much of his savings. He had been saving up to go to the university, to learn to read and write. That seemed unlikely now. He pushed those negative thoughts from his mind. He would not focus on that. Ugh and Chastity set out as the sun began to set. On had arranged to meet them at a tavern. As they approached, they spotted him standing outside. With a friendly nod, he joined them and led them to a part of the city that they had not been to before. Brothels, bars, and gambling dens lined the streets. Somewhere nearby, a woman laughed hysterically. Han led them down an alleyway. I reported that those thugs attacked me, and I defended myself, so you shouldn't have any trouble or questions as far as that goes. Ugh grunted in response. Chastity started to say something but stopped herself, perhaps thinking better of it. As the last rays of the sun were beginning to fall beneath the wall surrounding the city, Han showed them a solid door built into the side of another structure. He knocked, and a slit appeared in the door, revealing piercing blue eyes. A moment later, the door swung open on heavy hinges,